On February 28, 2026, the United States and Israel launched a joint military campaign against Iran. The stated goals were bold and unambiguous: destroy Iran's nuclear program, obliterate its ballistic missile stockpiles, dismantle its regional proxy network, and trigger regime change. The White House projected a clean 4 to 6 week operation, a quick, surgical strike, in and out, mission accomplished. 32 days later, none of those goals have been fully achieved. The Strait of Hormuz is still choked. Iran's government is still standing. Oil is above $100 a barrel. Gas at American pumps has hit $4 a gallon for the first time since 2022. And today, Trump told reporters the United States could be done with this war in 2 to 3 weeks, and that a deal with Iran isn't even necessary to end it. Let that sink in. The president who launched this war is now saying he'll leave without a deal, without the strait reopened, and without the regime changed. That is not a victory lap. That is an exit strategy dressed up in presidential bravado.
Let's go back to how this started. On February 28, 2026, the U.S. and Israel launched strikes against Iran, saying they aimed to induce regime change and target Iran's nuclear and ballistic missile program. House of Commons Library. The assumption in Washington was that Iran would fold quickly. The thinking was simple. American and Israeli air power is overwhelming, the Iranian public hates its government, and a few weeks of bombardment would cause the regime to collapse from within. They didn't expect Tehran to counter their offensives with an unprecedented level of preparedness, striking U.S. bases across the Persian Gulf and hitting Israel hard. University of Western Australia. That miscalculation is the core reason we are where we are today. The opening salvo took out the heart of the Iranian regime, including Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, and triggered a torrent of hundreds of retaliatory missiles and thousands of drones from Iran across the region. The attacks have left enormous damage, thousands of people dead in Iran and Lebanon, dozens dead in Israel and the Gulf Arab states, and millions of people displaced in the region. Encyclopedia Britannica. This was not the quick, clean war anyone promised. Now, look at the Strait of Hormuz, the single most consequential piece of water on the planet right now. Iran's effective closure of the waterway, launched in retaliation for U.S.-Israeli strikes, has disrupted about 20% of the world's crude oil and liquefied natural gas supplies, driving up energy prices worldwide. Al Jazeera. Before the war, approximately 130 ships a day passed through the strait. The latest figures show 6 or fewer ships transiting a day, in coordination with Iran, NPR. 6 ships, down from 130. That is a near-total shutdown of the world's most critical energy corridor. The head of the International Energy Agency described the situation as the greatest global energy security challenge in history, Wikipedia. And Iran is not just blocking the strait. Iran has been charging transit tolls to foreign allies while entirely blockading the United States and Israel. On March 4, reports emerged that Iran would allow only Chinese vessels to pass through the strait, citing China's supportive stance towards Iran, Wikipedia. Think about what that means strategically. America launched a war, and the outcome so far is that China gets cheap oil, while the rest of the world pays record prices.
Now, here is where the goalpost shifting becomes undeniable. When the White House was asked point-blank on Monday whether Trump would declare victory even if the strait remains closed, White House Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt said reopening the Strait of Hormuz was not a core objective of winning the Iran war for President Trump. Time. Read that again. The world's most critical oil choke point, the single biggest economic wound this war has inflicted on the global economy, is no longer a core objective. A war that disrupted 20% of global oil supply is being wound down without securing the waterway that caused the disruption. Inside the White House, many top officials recognize that reopening the oil choke point controlled by Tehran is a critical goal, not only for ending the war, but also for bringing down soaring oil and gas prices, which are quickly shaping up to be a key liability for Republicans ahead of November's midterm elections. But as they stare down Trump's self-imposed 4 to 6 week deadline for ending the war, top administration officials have privately acknowledged that they can't both achieve their military objectives quickly and vow to reopen the strait within the same timeline. CNN. So the administration is trapped. Move fast and leave the strait closed, or stay longer and watch the domestic political damage compound. They are choosing the exit.
Let's talk about the negotiation theater, because this is where reality becomes surreal. Trump has repeatedly claimed Iran is begging for a deal, that talks are going well, and that he's communicating with what he called a new and more reasonable regime in Tehran. Iran's foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi, gave a direct response to that on Tuesday. He told Al Jazeera that no negotiations are going on with Washington. Negotiation is when two countries engage in talks to reach an agreement, and such a thing does not exist between us and the United States, Araghchi said. CNN, Iran is prepared for at least 6 months of war, Araghchi said. We do not set any deadlines for defending ourselves. We will defend our country and our people as far as necessary and by any means required. CNN. Meanwhile, Trump's own timeline has been a moving target. A foreign policy expert at the Quincy Institute noted, remember, at first they said that this war would be over in 4 days. Then 3 weeks ago, they said it would take 3 weeks. 3 weeks have passed, and now we hear that it's 2 to 3 weeks. The timeline just keeps on being extended because, at the end of the day, the United States is no longer in control of this war. Al Jazeera.
The administration has also sent a 15-point peace proposal through intermediaries. Iran's response was swift. An Iranian spokesperson labeled the demands as largely excessive, unrealistic, and unreasonable. Iran countered with its own 5 conditions, including an end to all aggression, war reparations, and recognition of Iran's sovereignty over the Strait of Hormuz, NPR. Iran is demanding payment for the war that was launched against it and recognition of control over the strait. Those are not the conditions of a country that is losing. Now look at what is happening on the ground across the region. Iranian strikes targeted U.S. embassies and military installations in the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Kuwait, Bahrain, Iraq, Oman, and Jordan. Wikipedia. American allies across the Gulf are being hammered while hosting U.S. forces. Kuwait International Airport's fuel depots were targeted by an Iranian drone attack, causing a massive blaze. CNN. At least 2 people were killed in a U.S.-Israeli strike on an orphanage in Iran, according to state media, CNN. Today, April 1st, Iran launched 3 waves of missiles at Israel within an hour. One of 3 missiles launched from Iran hit an oil tanker off Qatar's coast, Al Jazeera. The war is not winding down, it is spreading. On March 28th, the Houthis joined the war, conducting a ballistic missile attack towards Israel. On the same day, 2,500 U.S. Marines from the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit arrived in the Middle East as part of the effort to open the Strait of Hormuz. Wikipedia. More troops are arriving, as the president says he wants out in 2 weeks. That contradiction tells you everything about the chaos inside this administration. Iran's strategy is not random, it is calculated. Iran's mosaic defense strategy of asymmetrical warfare entails adapting and responding to U.S. military weaknesses by targeting U.S. bases in Persian Gulf countries with drones and missiles, and decentralizing its command structure so leaders can quickly be replaced when they are killed. The regime has been assisted by Russia and China with supplies of dual-use technologies and revenue from oil imports. Russia has also reportedly been giving Iran intelligence on the location of U.S. assets in the region. This is not an insurgency. This is a coordinated geopolitical counteroffensive backed by 2 permanent members of the UN Security Council. The economic fallout is already severe, and the worst may be ahead. Oil prices surged to $114 per barrel, the highest since the COVID-19 pandemic. Analysts projected potential global inflation increases and risks of recession if disruptions persist. The UN World Food Program warned that the war is driving significant long-term increases in global food prices, as nearly 50% of global urea and sulfur exports transit through the Strait of Hormuz. And even when this war ends, the damage does not stop at the ceasefire line. A senior shipping executive warned that shipping insurance remains sky-high and that seafarers are less willing to make the journey after witnessing attacks at sea. Over time, traffic through the Strait of Hormuz is likely to decline due to the risks associated with concentrating oil trade in such a volatile area. The economic consequences will outlast the conflict by months, possibly years.
On the diplomatic front, America's alliances are fraying. European nations who were not consulted before Trump launched the Iran war have tried to demonstrate they will eventually be on board in helping police the waterway. But many have been clear they aren't interested in fixing a problem of Trump's own making. Trump responded this week by threatening to leave NATO, telling allies, in his own words, to start learning how to fight for themselves. In a post on Truth Social, Trump took aim at countries like the United Kingdom, which had refused to support the campaign, telling them to either buy U.S. fuel or get involved. "You'll have to start learning how to fight for yourself," he wrote. Al Jazeera. The very alliance architecture that has underpinned Western security for 75 years is being destabilized in real time as a side effect of a war that was supposed to last 4 to 6 weeks. Now, Trump is scheduled to give a national address tonight. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth on Tuesday claimed the U.S. had achieved regime change in Iran, even though the country is still ruled by the same repressive government. CNN. The administration is already building the rhetorical scaffolding for a managed retreat. They need a narrative that sounds like victory. They need something to tell the American public while gas stays above $4, while troops remain deployed, and while the Strait of Hormuz stays effectively under Tehran's control. Trump told reporters at the White House, "We'll leave because there's no reason for us to do this." Bloomberg. No reason, after launching the war, after promising regime change, after the 4 to 6 week deadline has come and gone. The President of the United States is now saying there is no reason to continue a war his administration started.
Here is the bottom line. The United States and Israel have yet to clearly define their rationale for starting this conflict, their goals, and their exit strategy. With the Iranian regime having mounted a robust response, the Middle East has been plunged into an unnecessary confrontation with no end in sight. University of Western Australia. The Strait of Hormuz may remain contested long after the bombs stop falling. Iran has demonstrated it can absorb a military assault from the most powerful military alliance on Earth and remain standing. Oil markets are traumatized, global supply chains are broken, American alliances are strained. The Gulf states that bet on Washington are watching their infrastructure burn. And the man who started this war is telling his staff he wants out in 2 to 3 weeks, without a deal, without the strait open, and without the regime changed. Whether you call that a strategic pivot, a tactical retreat, or something else entirely, one thing is clear. This war did not go according to plan, and the world is going to be paying for that for a long time to come.